everybody, and welcome back to Dollar Tree Dinners, and welcome to Souptober Day 6. Before we jump into today's episode, I have 3 things I want to talk about. The first is Hurricane Milton. If I have any subscribers or any viewers who are in Florida and you are currently evacuating, please stay safe. I hope you and your family are able to get out in plenty of time. And just like with Hurricane Helene, if you need any immediate assistance, please do not hesitate to contact me directly. The second is that I'm going to be donating money to an organization called Beloved Asheville. That is an organization in Western North Carolina that is attempting to help people who were affected by Hurricane Helene. I just want to bring attention to this in case you might also have the means to donate to that cause as well. I will be donating my own funds, and I will leave a link in the description box below in case you want to donate as well. And the third is that after this Souptober series is over, I will probably be working on some hurricane preparedness. I know it's a little bit late in the game for that. That Lisa Dawn posted a video recently, and definitely feel free to go check that out. I will be trying to put together a 72-hour food kit, and I will also be testing that 72-hour food kit just to see how well it works. I'm currently in the planning and research stage for that content, and I like to really put some thought into it, which is why I haven't done anything about it yet, but hopefully I have something to share with you guys soon about emergency food storage or hurricane preparedness. So with all that being said, let me show you what I did with the leftover cheeseburger soup from episode 4. I actually turned it into a tater tot casserole because I wanted to try to make the leftovers in a way that was still gluten-free. I was hesitant to do a potato dish with it though because there were already potatoes in the soup itself. I was looking through my freezer and realized I had about a half a bag of tater tots in there, and tater tots are gluten-free. So that was what I ended up doing with the leftover cheeseburger soup. And now we get to figure out what soup we are making on day 6. We are down to 5 soups left to choose from. The list is getting smaller. All right, generate a number 1 through 5, and it picked number 5. So whatever's on the bottom of this stack is what we're making today, and that is gonna be creamy roasted cauliflower soup. So my story about this roasted cauliflower soup is that back when I was in my early 20s, I was struggling financially. And I was also struggling to learn how to cook. And I remember posting about this on Facebook, my struggles with cooking and my struggles with money and just trying to figure out ways to make ends meet. And I was actually sent this roasted cauliflower soup by my sister's best friend. The two of them worked at Aldi together, and Kara is her name. Hi Kara, if you're watching. Kara sent me this recipe for this roasted cauliflower soup. So here I am 12 years later, 32, and I'm gonna try this soup recipe that someone very graciously sent me at a time when I needed some help. Probably the reason I didn't try it back then was just because I wasn't quite as open-minded about recipes as I am today, and I'm sure it's absolutely amazing. She did tell me it's one of her favorite soups when she sent it to me. Again, this was 12 years ago, but I remember all of this so well. So this roasted cauliflower soup recipe is from the blog Cookie and Kate, and it calls for cauliflower, oil, salt, onion, garlic, broth, butter, lemon juice, and nutmeg. You guys know I'm gonna leave out the nutmeg. So this one is also gluten-free, and I feel like it's also a really great diabetic-friendly recipe as well because it is cauliflower based. You could really easily make this a dairy-free recipe, just like I talked about with the butternut squash soup, by swapping the butter with like bacon fat, sausage fat, oil, or plant-based margarine. I don't have any cauliflower, I already know that. I do have oil. It calls for olive oil. I do have some extra virgin olive oil. I am down to maybe like half a cup, but it says I need 3 tablespoons. It calls for red onion, but I have yellow, so that is what I'm gonna use. Kind of a dual purpose with this series. I'm trying to use up some things in my fridge, freezer, and pantry prior to moving in the next couple of months or so, but also to show that you don't necessarily always have to follow a recipe exactly as it's written. Feel free to substitute things with what you have on hand. I know a lot of new cooks might struggle with knowing what substitutions are good or allowed, and hopefully this gives some insight on that. But yellow onion, minced garlic, calls for vegetable broth, but I'm gonna use my chicken bouillon powder, which I am almost out of, but of course if you were to use vegetable broth, that would also make this soup vegetarian as well. Butter, I am down to my last stick, and it says fresh lemon juice, but guess what? You can still use lemon juice in a bottle. I use bottled lemon juice for so many things. It's a lot more affordable. I have never personally found that bottled lemon juice versus fresh lemon juice has made much of a difference, if any at all, in any recipes that I have tried. So with that being said, The only ingredient that I need to buy to make this soup is the cauliflower. It says we need about 2 pounds of cauliflower. I was able to get this massive head of cauliflower. This is 2.5 pounds for $2.89. In this case, it was cheaper to buy fresh cauliflower than frozen. A 12-ounce bag of cauliflower was $2. So I would have probably needed to get at least 3 of them because the recipe calls for 2 pounds and 2 12-ounce bags isn't quite enough. But in this case, it was about half the price to just go ahead and get the fresh cauliflower. Cauliflower and broccoli is a really good example of why I don't really have a vegetable garden. I've always wanted one. I think it's such a neat idea, being able to grow all of your own vegetables. But this is $2.89. And for anybody who's ever grown broccoli or cauliflower, you know that this takes about 4 months to grow. So 4 months of watering, pest control, fertilizer, to get a head of cauliflower that's under $3 at the grocery store. Because the vegetables that I would want to grow, the vegetables that I consume the most, are not very cost effective to grow versus just buying them. Preheat the oven to 425, so let's get that going. Now we've got to tackle carving up this massive cauliflower. So I did just notice when I got home that this cauliflower does have some black spots on it. That is usually just oxidation, and it's totally fine to eat. Let's see what we're working with here. I'm gonna pop off these leaves. I'm gonna try to pull out the core first, or just kind of cut around and try to get off all these florets. I'm gonna grab myself a big bowl so I can pop these florets in here as I cut them off. I'm gonna save the core and I'm gonna save the leaves, and I'm gonna do some research tonight and see if maybe we can make use of this in the next episode. So in the meantime, I'm gonna take some of my larger florets here and just cut them down into smaller pieces so they have more surface area for roasting. I'm going for pieces that are about 1 inch so that they all roast at about the same pace. One other thing that this recipe does not call for, but I think is gonna add a lot of flavor, is to roast the onion alongside the cauliflower. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna add my onion in with my cauliflower so that they can roast together for some lovely flavor. That is my big bowl of cauliflower floret. I'm gonna toss in some onion. If you're roasting one vegetable, you might as well roast all of the vegetables, right? So we're gonna take our bowl of cauliflower and onion. I'm gonna drizzle it with some olive oil. You can use any oil. And then I'm gonna season this with some salt. It doesn't call for pepper, so we're just gonna use salt and give that all a good toss to make sure everything's well coated. This is gonna be a very similar process to how I made that butternut squash soup. Let's grab our baking dish and line it with a sheet of parchment paper. I do get these pre-cut parchment paper sheets at Dollar Tree. It comes with 25 sheets. Perfect size for my sheet pan. And on goes our cauliflower and onions. Spread that out into an even layer. All right, we're gonna pop that in the oven to roast. It says to roast it for 25 to 35 minutes. I'm gonna put it on the bottom rack as usual. And I am going to be serving my soup with a sandwich, and the sandwich I wanna make requires some roasted red pepper. So I have a red pepper. So I think I'm gonna toss this in the oven to roast alongside the cauliflower. So I'm gonna take my red pepper and just cut up my red pepper into strips. I'm even just gonna use the same bowl that I just used for the cauliflower because there's no reason to dirty another bowl. And we're gonna toss that in some oil as well. Don't need as much because it's just one pepper. And also a little bit of salt. Is that a good toss to coat the bell pepper? Let's just go and toss our peppers in there as well. Probably gonna go ahead and get my pot prepped. So let's get that preheated over medium heat. Very, very similar process to how I made the butternut squash soup. I'm gonna go in with some olive oil, any kind of oil. I'm also gonna squeeze in a couple of glugs of garlic into that and let that kind of saute in the olive oil for a few minutes. I feel like even kind of picking out recipes can sometimes be a skill in itself when there are so many different versions of things online. I struggled with coming up with these 10 soups to try because, for example, if you look up potato soup, there are so so many versions of potato soup and you don't know which ones are good and which ones are bad. That's what I meant by sometimes it's kind of hard to even pick out a recipe because you don't, unless you have like a really good base knowledge of cooking, you don't know what a good recipe indicates. Like someone might look at this recipe and think it's bland because it doesn't have a lot of seasonings in it, without recognizing that roasting something is just as powerful and flavorful as seasoning it. I've got some garlic kind of sauteing in some olive oil right now. I reduced the heat on it a bit just so that I can let it go a little bit longer. I think my garlic is sufficiently roasted in olive oil as well. So now we can prepare our broth base, starting with 4 cups of water. And 4 teaspoons of our chicken bouillon powder, which might end up being the last of what I have in this jar. Pretty much. I have a little bit left in there, but not much. And I'm gonna let that kind of just come up to a simmer while we wait on our cauliflower to finish. It has been 35 minutes. Let's go ahead and pull out our cauliflower and see how it's looking. You can hear that crackle. You can see that beautiful brown color on everything. All right, I think that looks really lovely. So we've got our base of garlic, oil, and chicken bouillon powder. Now we're adding in our roasted cauliflower and onion. I just want to give the cauliflower a little bit of time to kind of soak up the broth before I just blend it. So I really want to make sure that everything is nice and tender. So I've been letting this just kind of simmer. It's been about 10 minutes or so. So I'm going to turn off the heat and we are going to bust out the blender. So the immersion blender in my case. You can use a traditional blender if that's what you have. But what I like to do is take it, in case you do have an immersion blender, take it, press down, and then pulse it a little bit. Press down, pulse, press down, pulse, press down, pulse. And then once you get to the point where it's starting to get blended, you can kind of change that up a little bit. Start to move your blender through it while it's blending. I just find that that's the easiest way to make sure that your whole kitchen doesn't get covered in soup. The recipe does say at this point to add in 2 tablespoons of butter. That's for a little extra richness and creaminess. And then with the heat off, we're gonna add in about a tablespoon of lemon juice and blend that in as well. And then she says to taste it and adjust for salt, and she makes a note that the recipe is amazing when it is properly salted. I am gonna add salt after I've tasted it because I want to do kind of a blind taste on camera. But first, what I wanna do before I try the soup is to make the sandwich that I'm gonna do on the side. I have some rustic sandwich buns. These were $3.29. In my fridge already, I had some basil pesto. I also had some deli turkey in my fridge. I did have to buy some provolone cheese. This was $2.50. And as you can see, I roasted up a red pepper I already had on hand. And these ingredients together are gonna make a Starbucks turkey basil pesto panini. I forget what I bought this pesto for. I might have bought it for the same thing. I feel like the only thing I really ever use pesto is to make this sandwich. But I'm gonna add a pretty hefty amount of pesto on the bottom half of the bread, or the top half, I guess it doesn't matter. I'm gonna add a pretty hefty amount of pesto to half of the bread. Let's add some turkey slices. Probably do about 4 slices of turkey on each one, maybe 5. Let's throw in a couple of our roasted red peppers. Now we can add our cheese. I'm going to bake these probably in my toaster oven at 300 degrees for 10 to 15 minutes, maybe 350 for 10 to 15 minutes, just to make sure that things don't get overly toasty. We don't want to repeat the last sandwich incident. Souptober day 6. Today we have a roasted cauliflower soup. And I saved one little pretty cauliflower floret so I can nestle that right on top there. I should probably mention that I don't know if it was this exact recipe that I was sent 12 years ago. I don't know when this recipe was posted. I do know it was a roasted cauliflower soup and the ingredients were fairly similar to this. May not have been this exact one, but it is finally time to try a recipe that I was sent 12 years ago. Bit of a delay on that one. I'm trying to think of how to describe this because the flavor is a little bit complex. It kind of tastes like mashed potatoes almost, like it has the texture of mashed potatoes, which I know cauliflower is a common substitute for potatoes. It is creamy without any milk in it. It does have butter in it, a small amount of butter, but you can always swap that for something else for a completely dairy-free soup. She recommends on the website to swap it for cashews. It kind of reminds me slightly of mashed potatoes, but a more nutty version of mashed potatoes because of those roasted flavors. The creaminess is so on point, and I do get that little zip of lemon in there too, like it has a nice little brightness. That one little roasted piece of cauliflower that I stuck on top there, I just had that bite and I thought it was really lovely. It really contrasted the soup well. So I feel like if I were to make this again, I might reserve some of the cauliflower to add in at the end to give it a little bit of a textural difference, or even doubling up on the cauliflower, making the soup as it's written, but then adding some extra roasted cauliflower on top for some texture. This soup is insanely good, especially when you consider the fact that there's no seasoning in this. There is just salt and that is it. There's garlic, there's lemon and salt, but no pepper, no anything. The only flavors that you're really getting are from the roasted vegetables. I do think it was a really good call to roast the onion with the cauliflower as well. And then I have my turkey pesto panini to go with that, which is such a good sandwich. I worked at Starbucks part-time for a year. I was working my corporate mortgage job Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5:30, and then closing at Starbucks from 6 to 9, or sometimes working at Starbucks on the weekends. But I worked about 3 to 5 days a week at Starbucks. I would have never come up with this sandwich. I would have never even tried this sandwich if it wasn't for working at Starbucks. I feel like working in restaurants has been one of the ways that I've been able to expand my palate, and I've only worked in a couple. I've only worked at CiCi's Pizza, Taco Bell, and Starbucks hardly counts as a restaurant. I feel like that's important to say because, like I said, I was sent this recipe 12 years ago when I was just 20 years old, and I feel like if I had tried it then, I don't think I would have liked it then because my palate wasn't quite as expanded as it is now. I have a much greater appreciation for recipes like this today than I did 12 years ago. But I really like this one, and this could be such a great base for a potato-less potato soup. And that's kind of what it tastes like. It tastes like a potato soup that doesn't have potatoes in it. So again, great like diabetic friendly recipe. A lot of you guys are saying that this Souptober series has been a lot of fun for you. We still have 4 days left, I want to say, after this. 7, 8, 9, yeah, 4 days left after this. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's roasted cauliflower soup, and I will see you again tomorrow for Souptober day 7.